Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. Today, we move away a little bit from free agency. We'll talk about it a little bit at the top of the show. We're going to go back into our NFL draft prospect series, looking at different position groups in the draft. Today's show is the offensive tackle position group. It seems like nobody's been talking about this as being a need on this roster. Obviously, we've got Charles Cross and Abe Lucas penned in as the starters. Abe Lucas, you're always wondering exactly where he's at with his knee stuff. It seems like we haven't heard anything, so everything's a go. He's going to be ready, full strength, into training camp, but you always wonder, so you better be ready to kind of plug and play somebody else in there. They signed Josh Jones in free agency to be their swing tackle, a guy that comes in potentially on an emergency situation or comes in as an extra blocker, potentially on an inline tight end sort of role. He's played that role in the past. So not a big signing. You mentioned right before we push record, it's essentially a Stone Forsythe replacement level player, and that's what I see as well. So, and then we've got Michael Jarrell, who was drafted last year, not quite ready for prime time. He did see some snaps last year, just based out of need at the beginning of the year before Abe Lucas was back, and shows some upside and some potential. Need to see how he fits in this new scheme, his athleticism and so forth. Need to revisit that for sure. Lots to talk about, Keith. Let's get started. Welcome in.
Yeah. Lots to talk about. So we have just, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying. Jones is the Forsythe replacement. He is not the Fant replacement, right? So they still need a third tackle. And then Jones is basically competing with the kid for playing time if an emergency happens. I think that they're still going to add, and I think they're going to add in the draft. Basically, they want to make Jones expendable so they can not carry him and just have the young developmental guys as their bakeups. And
and his
that
contract
leads right into today's
that.
show, because today's show is about offensive tackles.
Yeah, Jones's contract is a 1-year deal. It's it's $3 million, but only $300,000 or something like that, I think, is guaranteed on it. It's a get into camp and compete contract. We'll see how he does after that. I think you're right about the what they're looking for. Now, I don't know exactly where over the cap is situated after all of the first week of free agency. Maybe we can look at that. But the Seahawks don't have like a full bank of money to spend now on free agency. They've got Tevin Jenkins visiting, an offensive guard, coming in today. Looks like that's potentially something that they would not let him leave the building and sign and kind of secure that role, at least a penciled in starter at left guard prior to the draft, and then allow the draft to kind of roll to them naturally. But let's talk about offensive tackle. So we talked about Charles Cross. He's essentially on a 1-year deal with an option to sign as a 5th-year first-round draft pick. They'll probably end up doing that unless they can negotiate a longer-term deal. It seems like this is potentially even a better scheme fit for him than the previous schemes, and he has done quite well for himself. Certainly worthy of re-signing again. And we'll see how this year goes. I would assume that Charles Cross can be back on that 5th-year option at the minimum. Abe Lucas over at right tackle. We know about all the knee stuff. He's really good when he's available. Last year, he struggled to come back. He wasn't full strength until the very end of the year. I think this year is going to be a better situation for him, although more will be asked of him athletically than in previous seasons, Keith. What do you think about Abe Lucas and his fit in the wide zone system?
Well, last year he had that knee surgery, and then just struggled to come back from it. And so that was kind of where he was at all year. They were hoping to have him back by about week 4. They didn't get him back until like week 10. It was a slower recovery, and it's going to happen when you got a guy who's 300 pounds, right? Knees are hard to heal when you're a guy that's that big. But he hasn't needed another procedure. He's just getting stronger. And I just foresee him, kind of rebounding and having a better year. Now, it might still be sore and it might still hurt and it's going to bother him maybe for the rest of his career, but that doesn't mean it's going to prevent him from playing or anything like that. So at this point, you got to kind of just roll with it and see where he is physically, because when he's healthy, he's too damn good to ignore, right? And so it's just a matter of, can they get his body to a spot where he's healthy?
Right. By the way, we saw the Sam Darnold contract numbers come out, and it's a really good deal for the Seahawks. That's essentially a fully guaranteed first year, $37.5 million. After that, they've got get out of jail cards for each year, where they don't owe any guarantees or dead monies by a certain date. And so they can walk away if it's a bad situation. If it's good, they go ahead and pay him. Actually, the second year numbers are even better than the first year, so they get him at a little bit of a discount in year 2 if he's really rocking, and then year 3 is fully non-guaranteed at $35.5 million. So all in all, a great contract for this team, and a quality player in a succession situation where I still think they're going to draft a quarterback to have in place, ready to go. Sam Darnold's the kind of quarterback that you roll in a season with, just like we had Geno. And if they go down for whatever reason, your season's kind of toast anyway, unless you can grab a veteran out on the open market somewhere or trade for one or whatever. You just hand the keys to a rookie and you get them going for the next season. And that seems like their plan right now. And you said before we push record, it was similar to what Minnesota had set up. They got Sam Darnold in. He played on essentially an $11 million contract last year. Drafted J.J. McCarthy. Seattle could be doing the same thing. Yeah.
Honestly, everything kind of lines up. I don't know where you take a quarterback in the draft if you're the Seahawks. At this point, do you try and take one in the first round at 18 if there's one available that you like? Do you wait until the third round and hope that you can find a Kirk Cousins type, middle round guy with starter potential, and then develop them? I honestly don't know what the end plan is at this point, but you got to think that when you have a contract with your quarterback, it's structured that you can get out of it at the end of the year with nothing going forward. Just let him go and
it's even a tradable. He's tradable.
Actually,
so that's the thing about this contract is you can trade him. Mm-hmm. Now you would essentially want to trade him before the second week after the Super Bowl, so you avoid any sort of contractual obligations. But if you do carry him into the free agency period and prior to the draft, it's an $18 million injury guarantee is what's on their 17.5. Well, and I was going to say,
if you trade him, though, you trade that guaranteed money to the other team.
Yeah, because it's not a signing bonus.
If you're looking at if you're another team and you're like, hey, we need a quarterback, we're trying to make this work. We're going to trade for Sam Darnold. They're trading for a guy that's got an $18 million guaranteed contract.
Right.
That's like crazy cheap. So yeah, that's a tradable asset right there.
Okay, so let's get back on track here with offensive tackle. So general observation, Keith, overall, what's this tackle class like? And do you expect Seattle to tap into it?
I do expect Seattle to tap into it. I don't expect them to tap into it early because they've got their starters in place. And they've got Michael Jarrell, who they like as a developmental developmental project. And so really what I'm looking at with this group is, a middle round pick, someone that they can come in and compete with Jones to be that swing tackle, a guy with some upside, but not necessarily, ready to start right away where you're going to, use a higher pick for. But yeah, I do expect them to tap into this market. I don't necessarily love this year's crop of offensive tackles. I think there's a lot that project better as guards in the NFL. Even at the very top of the draft, there's some question marks there.
Like Will Campbell. Will Campbell's a great prospect, 6'6", big guy, 319, ran a 4.98 40. That shows he's got some athleticism, 32-inch vertical, so he's got some explosion, but he's got 32 and 5/8-inch arms. Like, is he going to get a shot to play tackle in the NFL, or is somebody just going to draft him and move him inside? Is he going to fall in the draft, maybe even to Seattle?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he's going to fall that far, but he's a guy that there is a question mark. I mean, with him as far as his length and his ability to handle speed rushers, although he did handle them, in the SEC all the time. And there's some great defenders in the SEC. So there's some reason to think he's going to do there. One of my concerns with him when I watch him is he's very good. Which I know, how is that a concern? Well, the reason why it's a concern is that where is the ability to improve, right? He is fairly close to his ceiling right now, meaning that what he is what he's going to be. And
I don't know. Yeah, maybe, but he's still 21 years old.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, technically he's really good. So he's going to continue to change his body, get stronger, that kind of stuff. Sure. But he's not a guy that you're going to come in and fix. Oh, if we fix this footwork thing, he'll jump from being, good to fantastic, or, because he's already does all those technical things really well. And so
that seems more like a draft like a player that's guaranteed to be successful in the NFL rather than something I'd be worried about.
Well, I mean, what it is it's a guy that you can draft, you can stick in there day one. He's going to be good. That's going to be a thing. But what it does is it does hint that he has already been coached up to near his ceiling, and he's not going to take major jumps forward like a lot of.
But does he need to?
Players do.
I mean, he's a top 10 talent in this draft.
All players need to. The difference between college and the pros is a large jump.
So would he be a scheme fit? Would he be on Seattle's board if he were to fall at 18? Would Seattle run up to the podium and take him?
I don't know. Because I think they would see him because of his lack of length as a right tackle. And so if they've got a guy like Abe Lucas, if they're confident in Abe Lucas's knee, I think they would let someone else draft him. Like they would trade down a couple of spots and let someone else come get him. Simply because if he's there and people are like pounding the table for him, that means someone else wants him and he's going to be more valuable to another team. I'm also not convinced he doesn't end up moving inside to guard at some point in his career because of his lack of length. So
I agree with that. So one of the prospects that in early mock drafts in January and early February, Armand Membo was kind of in that range where Seattle was looking at 18. He seemed like a guy that would initially be somebody that might slide inside and fit one of those coveted guard spots that Seattle seems to struggle with so much. Since the Senior Bowl, though, this guy and the combine, where he's 6'4", 332 pounds, ran a 4.91 40, and had a 34-inch vertical and a 97 percentile broad jump and a 174 split, shows that this guy can pretty much excel in any scheme and compensate. He's got 33.5-inch arms, which I think is about the minimum you want to have for a tackle in the NFL. Teams are going to play him at tackle. So now he's viewed as a tackle, probably going a little earlier than Seattle's pick at 18, but a really good prospect.
Well, when we started this process, you're right. He was ranked on the consensus big boards. They're around 24. I think I remember where he was at. Now he's 8.
Right.
He's viewed as a top 10 pick. Part of it is that there were the questions about whether he could stick at tackle, being, 6'4" instead of 6'6", and viewed as more of a straight ahead guy. Those questions have been answered. He answered them at the Senior Bowl. He answered them when, with arm length measurements. He's now got the length that teams covet to handle the edge rushers. I think that, his floor is as a really good right tackle, a really, really good right tackle. And his ceiling, of course, is, a guy you can stick on the left side and not worry about for the next decade. So,
and if he should somehow struggle outside, he can always move in.
Yeah, he's a guy that I'm not concerned about as far as that kind of stuff. He's so athletic, and he's so just, you watch him play and he has that fire. He's not a technician.
He's a finisher.
Yeah, he's not a guy that wins only because of, technique. He wins because he just freaking overwhelms whoever lines up across from him. And then you throw in that he has some good technique, and there is, he could improve his technique, but he still wins. This guy, he came into this process as one of my favorite players for Seattle to pick because, I just didn't see why he was at 24. Well, everyone, kind of caught up, and now he's that's why he's at 8. And so I would be surprised if he gets out of the top 10. He's a fantastic prospect.
Okay, so now we're getting into a couple prospects that could be in Seattle's range if they decided to go offensive line at tackle in the first round. I'm with you. I'm not quite sure about the fit and Abe Lucas, and we're still not ready to hedge against Charles Cross because he's essentially got 2 more years on his deal. Anybody that you're going to draft in this range, you're going to want to come in immediately and start for you so they can have an impact on the roster. Kelvin Banks is my next guy that I've got in my slot at 6'5", 315 from Texas, age 21. Athletic upside is off the charts. A lot of people have him being able to play 4 positions, right tackle, left tackle, also inside at either guard spot. What do you think of him?
Well, he's a guy that, again, you look at and you watch him against college players and you're like, boom, this guy is a top 10 pick, franchise left tackle. And then he shows up and you get some measurements and you realize he just doesn't have the length that NFL teams require at the position. And all of a sudden now you're like, is he a guard? Can what we see on his college tape project, and, can he elevate his game to a point where he can be successful as a tackle? I think he can. His footwork is so smooth and he's so quick. Like, he doesn't have the length, but he'll be able to get his body over there.
If Seattle were to draft him at 18 or a slight move back or whatever, and he was sitting there, and then Abe Lucas was healthy, I wouldn't mind seeing Kelvin Banks start his NFL career at right guard. Because he's such a good mover, really quick, a good technician, but also a fluid athlete in space where he can get out to the second level. He can get outside on that wide zone and really kind of cut off that backside. And I think that's why I wouldn't rule it out, because he's such a good scheme fit, even if he were to slide into guard initially, and he could still be there as a guy that could go in for Abe Lucas. Should Abe Lucas go down, he'd be your number 1 option, in fact, to move outside, and you just slide somebody else in. You've still got you've got Lumea, you've got Bradford, Haynes, you've got some other prospects there at guard that could, take over. But I see it as a potential possibility still.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that you and I've talked about, since the season ended, is most of the offensive line prospects that you look at and have great potential at the next level are tackles, and some of them, lack some length or some things that, so you think, well, maybe they're gonna push inside. But if you go draft a tackle, play them at guard for a year, while they get used to the NFL, they learn zone blocking, they learn, all the things that you need to do in Seattle's offense, all that kind of stuff, with the expectation that eventually he'll move outside, where his natural position is. Like, okay, that seems, um, like a good plan, and it fills one of the needs this year. So yeah, a guy like him, you draft and start him at right guard, and then a year from now he's your right tackle, or you start him at left guard, and a year from now he's your left tackle because they decide to move on from Charles Cross as he enters the last year of his contract, and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, I mean, I could absolutely see the Seahawks doing that. It fills the need, fills a major hole this year at guard, but it also gives them some flexibility, going forward long term. So.
Yeah. No, I think he's an ideal prospect to watch for in the early draft. That might be a surprise to some. I think most people are so keyed in on Seattle drafting a guard, needing guards and centers. They're not really thinking about the tackle spot, but a guy that can slide inside and give you that scheme diversity, and long-term fulfillment at tackle would be an ideal value pick at that spot. It's not sexy by any means, but it could certainly do the trick. Okay, Keith, I'm going to let you take over as far as the prospects that you want to talk about that would be on Seattle's radar, after pick 18, or if they were to trade back in the first round. There's a couple guys still available, but more in the second and third round.
Well, the next thing I want to talk about is Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, because this is a guy that, at 6'5", 317, he's got the arm length that you're looking for. So he's actually got, length to secure on the, the edge rushers. But this is a guy that when you look at his tape, especially this last year, I mean, you're like, why isn't he the number one pick? Well, he's not not the number one pick, but the number one prospect at the position. He's not, because he hurt his knee and missed only played 6 games. He was out.
Right.
So it's really going to come with what do his medicals say? And if they're good, well, then he'll probably be drafted, mid first round. And if they're less good, he may drop into the second or third. But he is got elite foot speed. He's got tons of power, just great mobility. His lateral movement makes him such an ideal fit for tackle at in this particular scheme. And I just think that he's a guy that to keep an eye on, because it is a difficult evaluation because of his knee, and if he falls, he becomes a target where you're like, all right, so let's go get a guy that's going to be there for the future. Maybe be a, your left tackle of the future, and you have one more year of Charles Cross, and then you stick this guy out there as long as his knee survives. So,
yeah.
But yeah,
I would have him rated as high as Telvin Banks, if not for that injury. And it really depends on the evaluations, like you say. But I think he's an ideal fit athletically for the scheme, and could stick at tackle for you. Now, in all things considered, you still want Abe Lucas to be out there and doing those things. This guy could also do the same thing that Banks could do: slide inside to guard, transition, over time, or stick at guard and be a great, Pro Bowl level guard for you. So I like it.
Yeah. After that, things get a little, there you end up with a bunch of guys that there's reason to like them. There's reason to be a little hesitant to take them really early. A guy that I looked at that I kind of like, Jonah Savigny. I probably butchered the hell out of that. He's a guy, again, he's 6'4", 34-inch arms. So he's kind of got that right at the he just barely hits the length threshold. But man, this guy just gets out there and plays with some incredible athleticism for a guy that size. I mean, 4.95 in the 40, like,
Yeah.
4.66 in the short shuttle. These are great numbers for a guy that's that big. And I just like the way he moves. I think that um, he's huge, and he walks out there and he just looks big. We're very good against speed rushers. I think that he could move inside and just absolutely excel there. I think as a tackle, he's going to be limited to the right side. I don't think he has I don't think his future is as a franchise left tackle, but as a right tackle, you could definitely do that. Or he could be just an absolute starter, and just mauler at guard and
I agree.
finishes plays, just all the things. And you're looking at this. This is a guy that you're maybe looking at 52, and he's going to be there. And he gives you that flexibility to play guard and be great. If Abe Lucas's knee doesn't hold up and you need to move him out to tackle, he can still be very good out there. So he's kind of
I like him. I thought that he had just a little bit of limitation that showed up at the Senior Bowl, where it looked like he was getting beaten a few different times. I thought it knocked him down a slot or two for me after that, in that you did expect him to have the agility, and he kind of came up a little short there. And so my projection was he might be a better fit inside at right guard, and more of a gap scheme kind of a guy, a power scheme rather than a wide outside zone. So I'm not sure of the fit in Seattle, but I'm not an expert. I'm just kind of speculating here.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm looking at this as who on this list is a guy that could excel at guard in year one and fix a problem while also offering, tackle likelihood in the future. You know what I mean? Like if there's upside there, and I think that you're looking at a guy that is definitely a guard in year one, but I think there are some things that you could clean up and have him be a right tackle, going forward. So,
what do you think about Josh Connerly, Jr., the tackle from Oregon? I liked him early in the process, thought he'd be a fringy first round guy. He struggled a little bit at the Senior Bowl with anchor and strength and so forth. But if you really take a look at him and take a look at what he did, 9 pressures allowed at Oregon, 0 sacks in 2024. If you take a look at his vertical and his split, his 40 time and the length, he looks like a guy that could fit the scheme really well. So you can't rule him out. I don't know how Seattle views him, but if he would be a guy that's falling a little bit in the draft and they're at 50, I think he'd be a scheme fit.
Oh, absolutely. This is a guy that
and at left tackle too.
Yes. Okay. He's only 21. Let's start there. He's like really young. And if you go and you watch him play against Washington, or some of the earlier games in the year, you're looking at a guy that he looks like a guy that's going to be a top 10 pick. I mean, he is so smooth in his movement. You see moves and counter moves, and he just is there. There's just no question on whether or not he's gonna be able to win as a pass blocker. And then look later in the year, the Ohio State game that ended their national title run, and you see, well, maybe there's some issues there with his anchor against bull rush and that kind of stuff. But man, he is going to be, I think, an elite pass protector, and the way he moves just screams outside zone. this is a guy that if you draft him, you're not planning on Charles Cross being with the team after this year because you don't need him. And so you're going to go get this guy, stick him in as your left tackle, save a bunch of money on Charles Cross, maybe even get an upgrade as far as overall performance. And I would not hate that pick in any way.
Wow. I didn't know that I was going to get that ringing endorsement from you.
No, I mean, he's a guy that I absolutely love.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's definitely got some upside. I mean, I like the NFL readiness. I like the savvy technical part of his game. The anchor part, the functional strength obviously can always be improved, especially for freshmen coming into the NFL. You always want to see them in the weight room, and they're usually better in that aspect in year 2 and beyond. But he's got everything else that you want, especially in this scheme. It's like, that's you give up some of those strength qualities that you might otherwise look for, and you're looking for agility, and this guy checks all the boxes in that respect for sure.
Yeah.
I guess I would agree with you. I mean, if he was the pick, not at 18 maybe, but maybe Seattle moves back a little bit, moves off that pick, gains a couple other things. It's in the 25 range. It seems like it would be a slight reach, but you go from 25 to 50 before your next pick. I think if he's going to go, if he's going to go anywhere in that range, it's not necessarily a reach. It's just a range where you have equal value, between 25 and say 60 or 70, and you pick your guy. I mean, people kind of need to get over the idea that, well, this is where everyone said he should go at 35 or 40. And we picked him at 25, and so that's not very good value. You got your guy. I mean, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Whatever. I'm people are like, oh, he should go at 40 or at 35, and you got him at 25. Well, that's what people like me and you and guys in the media said he should go at 35, not NFL GMs. Like, where do you have to take him to get him?
That's right.
And I think if you're getting a guy with left tackle of the future, like talent at 25 and not picking in the top 10, that's incredible value. So, you know what?
So what would be his role in the first year if he was drafted in the first round? And you're looking for that impact, you're not going to get it necessarily.
Well, if I'm drafting him in the first round, let's say they move back and take him at 24, he is going to be my left guard playing next to Charles Cross while he learns. And then with the idea that he's going to slide outside next year.
Interesting. So what if they today,
I want him on the field.
Tevin Jenkins, okay, let's just put this out there. So Tevin Jenkins is visiting the Seahawks today at offensive guard, played at Chicago. Actually, was one of Chicago's best linemen, but they've completely revamped their line. He's on the free agent market. He's the best available free agent actually out there on Monday as we're recording. And he's kind of a guy that's starter level that you would plug in at left guard day one. What if that happens? Does that reduce their plan in any way to do kind of what you just said?
Well, it depends on where, how the draft unfolds and who else is available and that kind of stuff. If you drop back, let's say they get Jenkins, they still decide to drop back and they're sitting there and you're looking there and Marcus Inamabwe, the 6'3", 225 safety out of South Carolina is sitting there. Maybe you go that route instead, because now suddenly you don't really need the left guard. Yeah, it would be great to have your left tackle of the future and all of that, or you could go get, a guy that looks like the second coming of Cam Chancellor. And
well, I guess it would depend too on the Tevin Jenkins contract structure. What you would do there too, if it's a 1-year deal or it looks like a 3-year deal on paper, but it's really a 1-year deal.
The other thing that you could do is move Tevin Jenkins over to the right side, and that way you can continue. You could play your rookie on the left side and put Jenkins in the right, and now suddenly you've got 2 good guards instead of 0,
Seattle
which they have right
fans,
now.
Keith and I are really trying our hardest to figure out how to get good quality talent on this roster. Even if we sign people, we're still drafting guys, and we're doing our best here. We're doing our best. I don't know what John Schneider's going to do though. How he views these guys, what value he places on these draft picks and where they're slotted and so forth. It's going to be fascinating to me. I think I'm pretty confident that they're going to draft an offensive lineman, probably 2. I mean, they've got 10 picks in this draft, 1 early, 1 later, or back to back, like in the 2nd and 3rd round. That wouldn't surprise me as well. But you're definitely looking for scheme fits. One of the things that I get the vibe from this offseason, Keith, with the coaches brought in, with the investment in all those coaches and the scheme and the talk about the scheme, is the commitment to the continuity of the offensive line. It's like in the past, and you've seen this as well, you draft a guy that looks like a power gap scheme. Then on the other side, you draft a guy that looks like a wide zone scheme guy that's undersized, and you play them all together because you're trying to find the best combo that you've got on the roster, but the roster is imperfect because you really haven't drafted for a specific scheme. And I think they're really going to try to do that now. Do you get that impression?
I do. I think that they made this commitment to switch to an outside zone and running game and this particular scheme, and they've been some drafting guys that do that. Other guys they've been drafting are more inside zone. They haven't been focusing on any gap man power schemes. So but still, it's a different profile, a different thing than what you're looking for. And I think now that they've kind of settled on, like, this is what we're looking for. Now they're going to go find it, go get it, and get guys that will excel in this scheme.
It's hard to do in the NFL because offensive coordinators change so rapidly. You get successful and the guy's gone.
Yeah, but
what makes you think that this is more of a long-term philosophical change?
Well,
just because it's kind of mandated by Mike McDonald and he's the HC?
Well, yeah. I think that, we've seen the limitations of the inside zone running game, and it works in some ways, but it's inconsistent. The outside zone scheme really, it has its own drawbacks, but it's got more versatility in terms of what you can do off of it. There's a lot more, play action and stuff that you can do. I just think that it's one that this is a team that the team really wants to go in that direction. And plus Kubiak's not a guy that's viewed as next year he's going to be a head coaching candidate. They think they've got a couple of years, and let's say he does decide to move on and he becomes a head coach here in year 3. You can still find an offensive coordinator that runs, an outside zone scheme. They're not that uncommon out there. This is the Shanahan, system, and
hopefully you've built some sort of a succession, situation in place.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there are teams around the league that are running it. So even if you don't have a guy developed that you're confident that they can run out there and do it, there are other teams that'll have guys that you can hire and promote. And so I think they're going to be okay with that. It's just a matter of you got to pick what you want to do and commit to it, because you can't have a roster that's half built for one scheme and half built for another. It doesn't work well.
So how about in the middle rounds, Keith? What prospects are you looking at?
I want to talk about Marcus Imbo out of Purdue. 6'4", 303, does not have the ideal length for a tackle. Only 6'4", 33-inch arms, 32 and 3/4-inch arms. So it's he's a guard. But he played guard left guard, and right tackle in college. He was successful at all those, including right tackle. Granted, college versus pros, but gives you a ton of versatility and is a guy that just screams an outside zone scheme. Like his movement skills, he could be a 240-pound tight end, the way that he moves in space. And
Yeah.
just smart with his angles and the combo blocks and everything that he does. He's got really nice athleticism. You can show on his kick slide, for against speed rushers. I just think that he's going to have a lot of value because his ability to move all over the line wherever you need him, including playing right tackle if that's where the job ends up being because somebody gets hurt or that kind of thing. Like I just think that he's a guy that you could look at and do a lot with and really just solidify your line because whatever doesn't work out as far as all the different guys that you have that are developing that you're really excited about, you've got a guy that you can plug in there. And
I like Bo. I like Milam, like White Milam, in the same sort of range, like that 50-52 range where we've got 2 picks. I see both those guys moving inside. One's going to be more of the technical, athletic upside guy that can move laterally in Bo, and then Milam's going to be a guy that's more of a anchor guy that's got the power and the finisher and depends on kind of what you're looking for. Both of them have the athletic upside, but Milam's got 32.5-inch arms. I think he's going to definitely move inside, but he played offensive tackle at West Virginia. So in a pinch, you've got, a guy that can come in and play multiple spots for you. But what else, Keith?
Well, then there's a guy like if you're get down into the middle rounds after get out of the 50s, get into the 80s or 92. Maybe a guy like Anthony Belton out of NC State. Guy's 6'6", 336, just an absolute like ginormous guy. Got the length that you're looking for. He just engulfs guys. He just takes over and really good, powerful blocker in the way that he does stuff. Moves really well for a guy that's at 336. Just a lot of power, a lot of strength in his lower half. And when you watch the way that they ran their stuff, he would pull and do stuff that have him out into space, takes good angles, gets up onto linebackers and doesn't, the speed of the linebackers don't tend to give him trouble. But okay, well, maybe he's not a perfect outside zone fit because of some of his agility testing, but I just think that overall you could make that work with him on the right side. And just he's just a powerful guy, and especially if you run a lot to the left, allowing him to just seal the entire back end, I think would be something that could really work for you. Yeah,
I like Ozzie Trapio, the 6'8" mammoth human. 316-pound guy from Boston College. He's a slightly above average athletic profile. Would kind of fit in that thing. He'd be in the fringy 3rd, 4th round range. Another guy like is Logan Brown out of Kansas. He'd be like a 5th, 6th round kind of a guy, but he's a little. He's less than ready physically, but he's got the agility stuff. So you kind of bring him on the roster. You kind of bring him along. I don't know if he's going to be NFL ready right away, but he'd be a guy that you'd invest in, let the coaches get a hold of him, let the strength and conditioning guys have at it. And 6'6", 311 pounds. He's got a 4.51 short shuttle, which is really good, but also the really good wingspan at 83.5 inches. And just a natural athlete guy that can come in and still has that scheme versatility and able to get out in the wide zone. And it's, and you're not going to, it's going to enable you to use one of your two first, like 5th round picks. That's kind of where I see the value of tackle in the draft for Seattle.
I would agree.
Getting one of those guys at the top, it wouldn't completely shock me, but also it would shock me a little bit just because of the guys we currently have on the roster. But in this range, I think is a good value.
Yeah, if you're going to take a guy at the top, there isn't an interior player that looks like they're going to be worthy of that pick. So yeah. If you're gonna draft at the top, you're gonna draft a tackle that can play inside in year one, and then you'll see what happens from there. But that's what the Seahawks need, is they need a guy that can play inside, because that's where they're weak. They're really weak on the inside. Another guy similar to what you were talking about, in the same range, Chase Lunt out of UConn, 6'8", only 304 though, and only 32 and 5/8 inch arms. So a guy that doesn't have ideal length despite being 6'8", but man, he moves well, really good slide, gets out side really well, very smooth in his movements, natural, just really a natural like technique in terms of his knee bend and the way he moves his feet and everything. It just is really really nice. Also didn't get penalized despite being out there against some of the guys that are some of the better athletes in the entire draft that he had to play against. And so but he's more of a developmental guy. He's a guy that really needs to put on some bulk and some strength to stop from getting bull rushed straight back. And
nice,
but I like that size and his ability to move laterally. I think is going to be great for as an outside zone like right tackle.
One of the players I really like is Johnny Cornelius out of Oregon. Kind of a right tackle prospect, 6'5", 310 pounds. He's got the agility, the length. Had a great junior and senior season at Oregon. Senior season allowed 0 sacks, 11 pressures on 512 blocking opportunities. Had a 85.3 PFF grade. And I just think that, for a later round prospect, and again, I'll say this again, I think West Coast guys tend to be undervalued as a general rule. And I think this is one of them. I think he could come in and really kind of athletically, he's got the traits that you'd like to have in a swing tackle. And
yeah, but his tape when it comes to pass blocking is rough. It's rough.
11 pressures, no sacks in both his junior and senior seasons.
Go look at the way he moves. It just, there was a lot of help being given to him in pass blocking situations. But yeah, because I just, his technique needs refined. And in some cases rebuilt. I really don't like his kick slide. I mean, not that they can't do it, but because all of the athletic traits are there, and this is a guy with definite like starter upside, but man, there's some technical work that needs to be done on him. And that's why he's going to be available in like the 5th round.
So how about a couple of late round flyers, like a Jalen Travis or a Jack Nelson, something like that?
Yeah, actually, Jack Nelson was the guy I was going to talk about next. 6'7" guy. This is a guy with, long-term potential to become a starter. Got the length that you're looking for at 6'7", all that kind of stuff. I mean, Wisconsin has always been kind of this school of guys that are really good with run blocking and have just a lot of practice and experience in terms of that kind of stuff. And I think that Nelson's a guy that he's going to be your swing tackle, at least, for the first couple of years while he adds some functional strength. But his ability to mirror in pass protection, to play smart when it comes to angles. I just think that overall, like, this is a guy that I think you're going to be able to draft, develop, get some use out of while he's developing, and slowly turn into a guy that you can expect to move outside and start. So,
yeah, or I wrote in my notes here, he's a left tackle prospect, and you continue reading, and it's he's got all the traits that you'd like to have at a right guard spot too, except for the height. I mean, he's really lengthy at 6'7", but he's got that.
It's hard to get leverage under a 6'3" defensive tackle when you're 6'7".
Right. But he's got all the other traits you'd like to have in the interior there. But I agree. I think he'd be a right tackle guy long term. He played left tackle at Wisconsin.
He could be a left tackle guy long term.
He could be, depending on his agility. Like, that's the only thing I'm questioning, and I don't know exactly where he's at, like compared to Charles Cross, for example.
Yeah, I just look at him as a guy that my notes on him are just watching him, his technique and his ability to mirror and match what teams do or what players do, not getting beat by counter moves. The pass blocking is there. I think he could be successful on the left side. But again, there's some work that needs to be done, like physically. He needs to definitely just increase his functional strength in order to be able to handle some of the top, edge rushers in the NFL.
Yeah. The other one I mentioned earlier is Jalen Travis out of Iowa State. And the only reason I mentioned him is because it's going to be a late round flyer, like 6th round, maybe 7th. He's got that swing tackle ability. That's the kind of area in the draft where you're looking for guys like that. He's not going to be a starter, but he's going to come in and add depth to your room. He's a true tackle prospect. He's got the length, 35-inch arms, but he's also explosive, a 35-inch vertical, 5'1", 440 straight line speed, but he's 339 pounds. He's got that kind of road grader mentality, but also has the agility to be able to kind of move around for you a little bit. So, at that stage of the draft, you're kind of looking for guys like that. And so he'd be potentially on Seattle's radar, I think.
If you look at, he better be on Seattle's radar if you're looking at a late round guy, because you just go look at him athletically, right? And his broad jump is good. His vert's 35 inches despite being that big. Like, his 10-yard split of 1.8 is good. His wingspan is in the 93rd percentile.
Yes.
Like,
just a big human.
It is a big human who moves well. And you just got to think, okay, this is someone that you can develop. He's kind of like Michael Jarrell in terms of like needing time to develop. Right. But honestly, there's a lot to work with this kid.
Yeah, he's got the high character traits. He's got the experience on both sides, left tackle, right tackle. That big frame, you can't teach that. And it'd be a piece of clay for sure. You just bring him in, mold him, and see what you've got. And I don't hate that, especially with 10 picks in the draft. We're probably going to leave the draft with 11, 12 picks, to be completely honest, unless they package something to move up. A guy like this would be totally worthy of a 6th round flyer, and a guy that would come on your roster. Because to be completely honest, our our roster is void of a lot of players to begin with, talent for sure, but just bodies to come in without having anybody sign, unrestricted free agent guys that get signed after the draft. It'd be nice to have a priority guy that you've identified in the draft that has a little bit more upside than those guys to be able to come in for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the roster, and at guard, they don't have the high end talent. They've got the depth developmental guys. And at tackle, they've got their 2 starters, and they've got nothing really underneath them other than Michael Jarrell, who
Right.
we hope will develop into a guy, but right now he's not there yet. And you want
he was Michael Jarrell was last year's Jalen Travis. I mean, that's the way this thing works.
Yeah, I mean, you need probably 5 guys on your roster that can play tackle, and right now they've got 2.5, maybe 2.25 if you are that worried about Abe Lucas's knee. So so they need guys, and if you're like, okay, we don't need a starter, we're not going to take one of those early guys and move them into guard. We're just going to wait and take guys that are 2 tackles.
And I think that particular philosophy is a mistake. Like, I think that if you got to be true to your board, especially with 10 picks in this draft. I think you really have to be true to your board. And if a guy's sitting there at 18 and man, he dropped for whatever reason, or you drop back a little bit and you're getting, tremendous value, you got to take a guy, because we've seen this over and over in the NFL. Stuff happens, injuries happen, things happen. You're drafting a year ahead of time, all that kind of stuff. If you're going to sit on a premier blue chip player for one season, is that the worst possible thing you could do? Well, some people would say yes, absolutely. But others would say, no, you're just really doing very well at forecasting your roster 2-3 years down the road. And I wouldn't hate drafting a player that normally would come in and start right away and sit on him, because it's a long season. He's going to get snaps. You're going to have opportunities, and you never know.
And it's different. Like at quarterback, wow, this guy dropped. He's going to sit on the bench on most teams and not play, unless you're looking for a starter. But at offensive line, if there's a tackle, and you're like, wow, this guy is a blue chip, whatever. It doesn't matter that you've got 2 starters. You take him and you play him at guard, because you can get him on the field and get utility out of him in year 1.
Yes.
Drafting a year early, developing, so that way, in year 2, you move on from Charles Cross and you have your tackle and you just slide him over there because you already drafted him, and you're not going into next offseason with that need.
Agreed. Cool. So we're done with the offense on the prospect series, Keith.
Yeah.
What is the overall offensive players in this draft? How do you view that versus the defense, which we're going to get into, and lines up with what Seattle's needs are?
It's interesting because I look at all of this, and Seattle's needs have changed since we started this process, right? They're at quarterback. They've got a guy on essentially a 1-year deal at their starter. And so quarterback's a bigger need now, in my opinion, than it was when we started this process. Wide receiver is a much bigger need now than it was when we started this process. And so, but overall, you look at it and you go, there's maybe not the really elite, high end, top of the draft offensive talent, but man, you start getting into about round or pick 15, and then you push that all the way down through the end of the 3rd round. There's a lot of depth in this draft on the offensive side at just about every position, and that works really well for Seattle. They've got 2 second round picks, 2 third round picks. You're going to be able to fill out your roster really nicely on offense.
So give me a very early prediction, Keith. 5 picks in the top 92. How many go to the offensive side of the ball?
3.
Wow.
I almost said 2.
Yeah. I would almost say 2 as myself.
because despite Seattle's need on offense and lack of need on defense, you've got Mike McDonald, who's the defensive coach. He wants to freaking dominate teams defensively.
Don't blame him.
And part of it's how it falls, right? I did a mock draft the other day where I ended up taking cornerback at 18 because an elite one fell, and I'm like, you know what? Pair him with Spoon. That would be fun. And that's not anything that why would the Seahawks ever do that? Well, because a blue chip player is sitting there and you can't say no.
It's been a long time, Keith, since we've locked down a certain side of the field or a back third or whatever, or our defensive line is so loaded. We just rotate guys and it's just a wave after wave of top tier talent coming at you all game. That's kind of in the past, it's been kind of a luxury thing because it's just been out of reach. And now here you got a top 5 defense. At least that's the way we finished the season in the last 8 games. And you can make it elite by adding 1 or 2 pieces. You don't think Mike McDonald would take advantage of that? I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, well, they already did. They already added DeMarcus Lawrence to that. And so, yeah, just looking for guys in the back end that can upgrade things, another or a defensive lineman that can rotate through. And think back to
and a reminder too, Keith, like they're evaluating the players in this draft against Josh Jobe. Like he came in and was your starter essentially on the other side opposite of Reek. And they're also evaluating Rick Woolen against some of these guys. Mm-hmm. So if you can upgrade at a certain spot, you do it. That's how it all works.
Yep. Mike McDonald wants to have an elite top 3 defense every year, and he's going to draft to make sure that happens. Now, there's still you still need the other side of the game, right? You still need the offense. They got to fix the offensive line. They got to get a wide receiver. They need to figure out what the hell they're going to do long-term at quarterback. But right now, he wants to be the dominant defensive team in the NFL, and do not discount them taking defensive players early and often in this draft, even though the defense looks solid and the offense isn't.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's just the way the draft falls. You mentioned that it's just like sometimes you have to stick and pick, and the players in that range in your bucket right there, you're going to take the best player available, and sometimes that's a defensive guy, and sometimes it's by a wide margin, and you just have to go with that pick. So those things happen. Cool, nice conversation, Keith. I'm glad we got the Darnold contract figured out. It's a good value for Seattle. We'll see what happens.
Value for Seattle, like the contract. Great value. I mean, it looked like it was going to be a good contract for Seattle, but the details on it are just like amazingly team friendly. The fact that they can get out of it after 1 year and not have that extra $18 million guaranteed as long as they cut him soon enough.
Yeah. I mean, they went heavy with the fully guaranteed first year salary, 37.5, right? That's not normally what you'd want to spend on Sam Darnold, but the getting out after that, it makes that part worth it. You've front loaded the deal and you have nothing on the back end. And that's a perfect case scenario for a quarterback like Sam Darnold in that situation. So, okay. So next time we come back, we'll have some free agency updates. I'm sure, this is kind of the, beginning of the second phase of free agency, if you will. And I'm sure they'll have a couple other additional value signings, before they're wrapped up, prior to the draft. And then we'll continue our look at draft prospects with the defensive side of the ball, looking at defensive tackles, I think in our first show back. Mm-hmm. And that'll be fun too, because there's a lot of nice prospects in this draft. And again, it's not those blue chip guys. There's a couple. But after that, there's a really good range of players that are going to give you rotational value right away in year one and have potential to be even more than that, all the way through round 3 or 4. So fun. In fact, I would argue it's one of the heavier talent prospect groups in the draft. Just fun to look at. Yeah.
Yep. Especially in, as we were saying with some of the other positions, picks 20 through 90, 89, somewhere in there. There is just a lot of depth. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. All right. Find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform, our YouTube channel. Leave some comments. The last show was a great one. We had a number of comments, which was fun to interact with. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.